Did you notice that I said strangers? Because I just couldn't not say something. When I logged in today, I saw that I had 3 subscribers. 3 people out in the world, complete and utter strangers, decided to subscribe, decided that listening to these stories was worth their time. Last video had a bunch of views too. I just wanted to say thank you so much. It means a lot to me. And I'll keep the stories coming. Like this one. Story 136. Back in my college days, there was a group of about 6 to 10 of us that all hung out, brought together by being in the same classes or running into each other in common areas. Joey was neither of these. He was a kid that worked the front desk at one of those strip mall nail salons, where me and the other girls would go get petties sometimes. We had been excitedly discussing our night's plans and had brought up a bar that Joey took issue with. He told us that bar was lame, they overcharged, and instead, with the coy look of an insider, told us about a different bar that none of us knew was there. He warned us that it was smaller, older, and not as flashy, but it had karaoke, and if we went there instead, we'd be enjoying girls' night pricing. You don't have to tell a group of 4 college students that twice. That night, we rolled deep, wary of it being a setup, but it was just as Joey had said. The bar was smaller and off the beaten path a bit, but we had a blast. Even better, Joey was there, and we were able to show our appreciation by buying him a couple of drinks for saving us from the other bar. After that, Joey joined our sort of informal party. But Joey did have his quirks, and one of them was that Joey had some sort of drink limit, or mix limit. We could never quite see it coming, but it appeared that at some point in the night, like your phone deciding to connect to a Wi-Fi you didn't know was there, it was as if, though, he was getting directions from a voice we couldn't hear, and invariably these directions were, "Hey, Joey, you know what would be a good idea? How about a game of hide and seek? Don't tell anyone, just go hide, and see how long it takes for them to find you." But what on his end seemed like a fun game, on our end meant somebody suddenly noticing Joey wasn't there, and we'd have to do the responsible thing and split up to go look for him. It didn't happen too often at first, but as spring semester faded into summer, it seemed to get worse, more often. And hey, fun is fun, but it did start to grow tiresome that we'd have to effectively pause a good time to go out and look for Joey, only to find him hiding behind a light pole or peeking out at us from a doorway of a falafel restaurant down the street. Amongst ourselves, we floated the idea of just not going to look for him, figuring maybe he'd get bored and come find us. We never tried that, though. In this day and age, I don't think any of us wanted to chance something bad happening to anybody, let alone Joey. Well, one night, the particular mix of cocktails in his system clicked him over to that hidden signal, and Joey disappeared. That night there were 7. One threw up her hands and told us she wasn't going to go look. She was having fun. The fact that she was in deep flirting with a guy at the bar notwithstanding, of course. The other 6 of us sighed and, like responsible sisters, started looking around. But even after we'd searched the entire bar, one of us even braving the men's room, got an eyeful, but not of Joey, we realized he'd left it entirely. And thus, we began going down the street. The street we were on had 2 other bars, and it started to feel like detective work. We'd go in and question the bartenders as to whether or not they'd seen a small, blue-haired Filipino boy. They had. At the first, he'd come in, bought a drink with an obscene name, and for a $6 drink had slapped down a 20 authoritatively and run away, without even touching the drink. At the second bar, he had changed another 20 for quarters, and then stacked them on the quarter-to-play pool table before again disappearing into the night. That's the way Joey was, good-natured and, even when fully into his cups, always looking to make sure other people had a good time. Maybe that's why I always joined the search party when he'd decide to play hide and seek. But after we'd gone through both bars, and Joey hadn't turned up, and that light-hearted feeling began to ice over, the unspoken reasons that we never let Joey just wander began to surface. As I looked up and down the streets I'd stumbled down drunk in heels many a time, the lights seemed colder, darker, as though I expected Robert Stack to come walking out of one of the alleys with a swirl of smoke machine behind him to set up the disappearance of our friend. I wasn't the only one to catch that feeling. The others I was with began to mutter and sort of look around, smiles sliding from their faces too. But then, one of the girls, Charisse, pointed out, "Hey, doesn't that look like the kind of place he'd hide?" We all turned and looked. There was a large brick building that took up the rest of the block. The front of it and its signage was on the next street over, making this the back entrance. And from the sidewalk dangled a chain that had previously been stretched across a small stairwell down towards a door. What had drawn Charisse's attention was the light visible as the door was ajar. We exchanged glances and decided to split up like this. 2 of us would go around the front to knock on the door or see what it was, a restaurant or an apartment building maybe. 2 of us would continue to walk up and down the street looking for Joey, and Charisse and I would descend down the stairwell and through the door to see if Joey had indeed decided on this to be his hidey hole for this night's impromptu game. Down the stairs we went. The stairs were very narrow and short. We had to step carefully, 1 foot at a time with a death grip on the rails, lest we slide on our heels to the bottom. I went first and pushed aside the door. The door appeared to lead into sort of a storage area. It had sections separated by chain link, and from what I could tell in the dim light, they were full of cardboard boxes and old furniture. The air was musty, damp, not unusual for Nebraska, but there was something pickly there, ripe, sharp. As Charisse joined me and looked around with me, we both began to get a very bad feeling. This wasn't a restaurant. It might have been an apartment building, but we definitely shouldn't be in there. And with the door left ajar, who's to say that the cops hadn't already been called, and there we'd be, drunkenly trespassing. There was something. Maybe that's why we didn't call out for Joey. That's why I didn't call out for Joey, because as we walked further, into this basement storage area, I became very aware of a feeling pulsing in my temples, telling me I shouldn't be there. As we rounded the corner of another row of chain-linked separated sections, we came closer to the source of the light, a camp lantern, sitting on an empty bookshelf. The light illuminated a small area in which a couple of defeated-looking couches slumped, and on one of those couches, facing us, was Joey. Joey was sitting upright, alert, and in the dim light, all I cared was that his posture and the light flitting across his moving eyes told me at least he hadn't passed out or fallen and hurt himself. Behind me, I heard Charisse's intake of breath, and figuring she was going to call out to him, I rose my voice to join her. "Joey, there you are!" And 1 second later, I realized how badly I had misread that situation, and that the flood of relief I'd felt had come far too soon. Charisse hadn't pulled in a breath to call to Joey at all. She had inhaled when her eyes fell not on Joey, but on the man on the couch opposite him, facing Joey. Something I hadn't even noticed. Not until it moved. The head moved, turning. As he was closer to the lantern, the light illuminated more of his expression. His eyes were sunken, red-rimmed like he'd been rubbing them really hard for a long time. His nose was small on his face, but his mouth and lips were huge, like links of sausage. He turned, skin looking yellowish white, like old cheese in the light, and he grinned. I took a step backwards, tripping into Charisse as my eyes flew to Joey. Now I didn't just take in his posture and the fact that his eyes were open. I took in his expression. Joey wasn't smiling. He wasn't having a good time at all. He looked terrified. I didn't know what to do. I froze on the spot. My eyes kept ricocheting between Joey and the scary man sitting opposite him, sitting on the couch between us and Joey. But Charisse, quicker on her feet, immediately piped up, sounding too cheerful, saying things like, "Oh, thank goodness that you found him. We were so worried. Joey, get over here." At her voice, or maybe at the edge in her voice, like honey on a blade, Joey jumped, and then, keeping his eyes clapped on the man before him, he rose, sidestepping the length of the couch, before darting to us, leaving space between him and the couch. I looked back to the man. He hadn't moved. He hadn't said a word. All he did, stick his tongue through his equally thick lips and sort of slurp it around at us. Now it was my turn to blurt something far too cheerful, too high-pitched, sounding screechy in my ears. "Thank you so much for finding him, but, they're gonna be worried. We better go." And with that, we turned and ran. I kept waiting to hear footsteps behind us, but nothing came. We clambered through the maze of separated storage sections, back through the door, and up the stairs with a speed that, frankly, it's a wonder none of us fell back and broke our necks. When we'd burst back onto the sidewalk, we nearly ran into the two friends that had been left patrolling the street. Their eyes were round, shocked, and they gripped at us, asking us, "What happened? What happened?" I turned to Joey, whom Charisse was already grasping by the upper arm. "What were you thinking?" Whatever strange signal had taken hold of Joey and sent him scurrying down the street had passed. He looked at us and told us that he had indeed meant only to go down a couple of steps so that he could see us from the street. But as he crouched on the stairs, he'd heard a sound behind him. And when he turned, the door that had previously been closed was open. And in his drunk logic, Joey figured that peeking out from the open door would be an even better surprise for us. So naturally, he'd descended the rest of the stairs and gone in. It wasn't until he'd turned back around to press his face in the opening between door and wall that he'd felt the heavy hand fall onto his shoulder. As he told us this, I could almost feel that same weight. I imagined it was wet to match its pickly smell. We heard shouts from up ahead and looked up to see our other two friends rounding the corner. They rushed over when they saw we'd found Joey and seemed very relieved, one of them even saying that it was a good thing that Joey hadn't been in that building at all. When Charisse asked why, they responded, saying, despite the lack of signage on the front, the lobby was open, and in the lobby, they found that the building was a halfway house, a sort of landing pad for men who'd just been released from prison, having served enough time for their crimes to not be incarcerated, but not yet trustworthy enough to rejoin society without heavy supervision. I looked back to Joey, mouth already forming the question I did not want to ask. Did he hurt? Joey shook his head, and again I breathed a sigh of relief 1 second too soon, because then Joey looked me dead in the eye and said, I mean, he hadn't yet, and looking from Charisse to me, he explained that while we could see the back of the man's head poking up from the back of the couch, what we couldn't see was what was in his hands, what had been in his free hand when he'd clapped the other onto Joey's shoulder to lead him further into the building. A long, rusty, dirty-looking knife. Understandably, we put a pause on the bar crawls for a week or two after that, and since then have stuck to 1 or 2 regular bars, neither of which are anywhere near the street we were on that night. And as for Joey, while he may still get into his little chaotic Christmas elf moods and dart off to pay for a round of drinks or set up free quarters on arcade games, he's never run off to play surprise hide-and-seek again. And that's the story. You know, I usually say the whole like, comment, subscribe, notify, just because that sort of seems like de rigueur, what you do here. But I'm so delighted some of you actually did. And even for those that didn't, thank you for stopping by. It means a lot to me. Be safe out there. And until next time, take care, strangers.